Are you unable to cope with the reality that maybe you aren't as accurate as you might think you are? And maybe you're looking for other reasons as to why the bullet just cannot connect despite your laser precision aim. Well, after having a fair share of misses, I'm in the same boat. And it took diving through a lot of the intricacies with how Apex really works before things finally started making sense and I stopped feeling so bad about missing all the time. Because it turns out that there are a lot of things that will make you miss whether you want to miss or not. So I decided to compile all of these reasons into one video, because by knowing how all of this works, odds are you'll be able to adjust for it and actually start hitting your shots once push comes to shove. And trust me, this is totally not a list of excuses as to why you couldn't clutch up when your friends were watching or something, but I mean, I guess it could be used that way too. Let's start off with the Wingman. This high skill weapon can be such a beast in the right hands, but so easily a throw if not used properly. While yes, you could argue that the difference between Wingman users can be chalked down to a skill issue, there are a few factors that you have to keep in mind when using it. You know, if you want to avoid missing shots that you definitely would have hit otherwise. Two of these factors being how the gun handles itself. The Wingman has one of the slowest projectile speeds out of all of the weapons in the game, ranking on the 7th place overall, with the second slowest projectile out of all of the guns in the game if you don't count shotguns or a limp shot with the bow check. What this means is that compared to other guns, you will need to lead your shots, as in aim ahead of where a moving target is going. Much more so than you would have to do with any other weapon, and I would only reliably shoot as if my Wingman was hit scan, as in where the shot instantly connects where I point it, as long as the target is no longer than 30 meters away or, you know, not moving. And that is good and all, but while most players could intuitively learn about this from just playing the game, this next Wingman mechanic is pretty unknown, and unless you pay very close attention, or I guess you're told about it, you might not know that this is going on. Have you ever kept your sights locked on an enemy and then spammed your shots at them, but still ended up missing almost every shot, despite your aim being right on the enemy? There is a very simple reason for this. In addition to the slower bullet trajectory, the developers have hidden another fun mechanic just to make it hard to hit your enemies, and that is recoil. That is right. Despite not being an automatic weapon, the Wingman also has a recoil mechanic. Without a tiny pause in between every bullet, the next shot will not be accurate and still go upwards, which means odds are you are going to miss the next shot, even though the target is in the middle of your screen. And by just taking a tiny moment to pause and letting the recoil play out, which is just a few hundred milliseconds or right after your gunshot animation finishes playing, will ensure that your shot hits right where you point your gun. You could also just gradually aim downwards to compensate for the Wingman's recoil when spamming, but since you only need such a tiny pause to recenter your shot and wait for the first shot accuracy to come back, I feel like it's just better to take a moment and stabilize instead. And while we are on the subject of the Wingman, this next issue is most noticeable when you're using headshot single-fire weapons like the Wingman, and especially if you are going for headshots, but it comes in two parts, so you really want to keep your eyes out for this one. And while it may be more noticeable for Wingman users, keep in mind that it happens for all legends and with all weapons. Flinching is one of the most frustrating mechanics in Apex, which, due to the lack of research into it, is very often misunderstood. In the first-person view, flinching is what causes your whole screen to shake, and it throws your aim randomly, of course. But how does it work? Flinching throws your aim around every time you take flesh damage, meaning you take damage from zone, area of effect abilities like caustic gas, and while receiving a headshots don't seem to cause any flinch when you have armor equipped, it certainly does make the effect worse if you manage to get cracked and take flesh damage versus if you had taking a body shot. But not only will getting shot at without armor throw your aim around, getting hit by an enemy will also unfortunately fill your screen up with visual clutter that completely blocks your view, which also gets more severe the more damage you take, and especially if your shield gets cracked. Apex loves to penalize you for not having a full set of shields, so try to heal them up. Even if it's just by a cell, just heal up as much as you can to make sure that you win every trade without getting your aim destroyed by flinch. And if possible, try to avoid taking a challenge or a risky peek against an enemy if your armor is broken. And speaking of visual clutter, there's a lot of that in Apex, and it's guaranteed to mess with your accuracy. Sure, there are smokes and gases and whatnot, but random clutter like dirt being kicked up from bullets hitting the ground, muzzle flash, the actual sun, grenades including the thermite light blocking your view, or other bright cinematic effects that end up completely blocking your view, and they will very often completely negate your chance of getting a shot in on your enemy. And there's not really any exceptional fixes to this, except maybe playing Mad Maggie thanks to her wall-like passive, Bloodhound thanks to their scanner ultimate, or using a Digifret whenever possible, especially on the Digi days where the digital threat is finally in the crafter. But even then, it's far from a perfect solution. Also, speaking about missing shots and inaccuracies and whatnot, I do want to nip this in the bud before you guys complain in the comments. I have been hearing a rumor that the Digifret isn't properly lined up and that it would make you miss for some reason, but that's just it. It's a rumor. If you just test it in the firing range, you can clearly see that the bullets go where they are supposed to, as long as the weapon has had its recoil fully reset, of course. Something that I have noticed is that it seems like high ping or bad servers will worsen the effects of flinch, where you don't get the visual effects of the flinch on your end or having it delayed, making it feel like you get hit but you're not actually affected by a flinch mechanic, only to have your shots on the enemy completely no-reg instead. So if you find yourself no-regging a lot if you take a risky duel, now you might know why. But that's just in first person, because not many know that there's actually a third person effect when you flinch as well, which, as I hinted at previously, makes aiming at a target a bit more difficult than you might initially expect. If an enemy gets cracked and starts taking health damage, their actual model will play a flinching animation as they are hit, with their head kind of flicking backwards and then having the character bend forward while raising their arms. This means that if you are like me and always aim for the top of a model to hit headshots, you will miss your headshot completely after cracking the enemy's armor. And if you are trying to track the head as the enemy flinches, odds are that their hands will block your headshot and only give you measly limb shot damage instead. Being aware of the third-person flinching animation will allow you to recenter your aim after the enemy is cracked and ensure that you will keep hitting your shots. The flinching animation is also a good reminder that your enemy will have a hard time shooting you back, because they're going to be affected by the flinch as well. In addition to that, as we have obviously already established, fighting in zone is a bad idea due to this flinch mechanic, but there are times in the zone where you literally can't see your target because you're fighting so deep in the zone or out of the zone yourself. This is by design, where the farther away you are from the ring, the more blinding it will be. That being said, if you have a hard time visually tracking the enemies while you or they are in the zone, or just keeping track of your crosshair during these times, I suggest trying out any of the colorblind modes, or even just switching the color of your crosshair to something that contrasts against the bright colors when you are in or around the zone. Personally, I struggle a lot with reading my crosshair when fighting in or around the zone, so I use a green crosshair and the Tritanopia colorblind mode for this very reason. And we need to mention this one more time. I really have to talk about recoil again. A worrying amount of players struggle with basic recoil control, and they let themselves miss so many shots that they just should be hitting. And that's very frustrating because there are so many ways of mastering recoil control, with some of these mechanics being so good that they're teetering towards exploits, and some being more traditional with just mastering the recoil pattern. But either way, no matter what way you would want to learn how to get better at controlling your recoil in Apex, this video on the screen will set you on the right path. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Peace out.